Major Thaddeus Riker awakened to the hiss of his cryopod's seal breaking. The metallic taste of reanimation drugs lingered in his mouth as the mission parameters scrolled across his neural interface. The Galactic Federation had betrayed him. "Special operation complete," chirped the ship's AI. "Welcome to Mors 9, Major Riker." Riker's vision focused on the display outside his viewport. Not the neutral trading outpost he'd been briefed on, but a hellscape of jagged obsidian mountains under bruised purple skies. Lightning forked between massive cloud formations that swirled like conscious entities. "Viridian, explain," Riker demanded, his voice still hoarse from cryo. "Your court-martial sentencing has been carried out," the AI responded dispassionately. "For your alleged crimes against the Calthorian peace delegation, High Command has sentenced you to exile on Mors 9. Riker's fists clenched. The Calthorian peace delegation had been a cover for assassins. He'd uncovered their plot, neutralized the threat, but the political fallout had made him a convenient scapegoat. Now he was being dumped on one of the most hostile planets in charted space. Atmospheric composition toxic to humans without filtration. Indigenous life forms primarily predatory. Geological instability at 78%. Projected human survival, 26 hours, Viridian continued. "And my equipment?" "Standard exile package deployed. 1 atmospheric converter, 1 multi-tool, emergency rations for 5 days. Riker's landing pod shuddered as it began atmospheric entry. He strapped himself in, his mind already calculating survival strategies. The Federation expected him to die here, forgotten. But Major Thaddeus Riker had survived 3 campaigns on Proxima Centauri's moons and the infamous siege of Titan Station. The landing was brutal. Impact tremors jarred every bone in his body as the pod crashed through the canopy of crystalline vegetation. When the spinning stopped, Riker quickly gathered his meager supplies and activated his exo-armor. The suit's integrity was at 81%. Not ideal, but workable. He'd barely stepped outside when he heard the first screech. 3 meters tall, with segmented exoskeleton and multiple compound eyes, the creature resembled an unholy fusion of insect and reptile. Its mandibles clicked in rapid sequence, a hunting call. Riker's military training kicked in. He remained motionless, scanning the creature's movement patterns. It wasn't attacking immediately, which meant it was either cautious or social, potentially part of a pack. Either way, he couldn't outrun it. The creature advanced, its clawed appendages digging into the metallic soil. Behind it, Riker noticed movement. Smaller versions of the creature, juveniles perhaps. This wasn't just a hunter, it was teaching its young. An idea formed. Dangerous, desperate, but possibly his only chance. Moving deliberately, Riker retrieved a plasma flare from his survival kit. The creature tensed, multiple limbs raising in threat display. Riker ignited the flare, its blue-white light casting harsh shadows across the alien landscape. Rather than flee from the light, the creature froze, its compound eyes reflecting the plasma's glow. The juveniles behind it dropped to submissive postures. "Light," Riker whispered to himself. "They respect light." Holding the flare higher, Riker stepped forward. The adult creature backed away, maintaining distance but not fleeing or attacking. Riker continued his approach until he stood directly before the magnificent, terrifying being. In a gesture born of instinct and desperation, he pointed to himself. "Riker," he said clearly, then pointed to the flare. "Lightbringer." The creature's mandibles clicked in a complex pattern. Then, impossibly, it lowered its front segments in what could only be described as a bow. Night was falling on Mors 9, and somewhere in the darkness, Riker could hear more creatures approaching. But for the first time since landing, he felt a flicker of hope. He had found his first advantage on this lethal world, and he intended to find many more. 14 days into his exile, Riker huddled within the vast hollow of a crystalline tree he'd named Haven. Outside, acid rain pelted the landscape, dissolving lesser vegetation with alarming efficiency. His makeshift shelter, reinforced with secretions from the creatures he now called the Luminar, held firm against the caustic downpour. The initial encounter had proven fortuitous. The Luminar, as Riker had dubbed them for their reverence of light, possessed a sophisticated social structure. The matriarch, whom he'd named Empress, had seemingly adopted him into their colony after his display with the plasma flare. Through a combination of gestures, vocalizations, and the rudimentary translation matrix in his neural interface, Riker had begun to grasp their communication system. The Luminar didn't just respect light, they worshipped it. On a planet where darkness brought death in countless forms, light represented safety and power. "Threat approaching," chirped his jury-rigged perimeter alarm. Riker grabbed his spear, fashioned from his pod's landing strut and tipped with a crystalline shard that could pierce even Luminar exoskeleton. But the warning wasn't necessary. The silhouette in the acid rain was familiar. Tracker, one of the juvenile Luminar who had attached himself to Riker. "Lightbringer," clicked Tracker in his species language. "The Empress summons." Riker donned his modified armor. The original exosuit had been enhanced with Luminar secretions that offered superior protection against the planet's hazards. He looked more alien than human now, a hybrid warrior adapted to Mors 9's brutality. The journey to the Luminar hive took them through terrain that would have killed Riker during his first days. Geothermal vents spewed toxic gases, predatory flora snapped at passing lifeforms, and gravity fluctuations made each step a calculated risk. But Tracker guided him through with expert precision. The hive itself was a marvel, a living structure of crystalline formations and bioluminescent membranes that pulsed with inner light. Thousands of Luminar moved through complex chambers, tending to larvae, processing mineral nutrients, and maintaining the colony's defenses. At the heart of this alien civilization waited Empress, twice the size of any other Luminar, her exoskeleton bearing elaborate patterns that glowed with internal energy. Beside her stood unfamiliar figures, representatives from other hives, Riker realized. "The darkness spreads," Empress communicated, her mandibles producing sounds that Riker's neural interface struggled to translate. "The Void Walkers grow bolder." Images flashed in Riker's mind, shadowy entities that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The Void Walkers were the Luminar's ancestral enemies, creatures that thrived in absolute darkness. "3 hives lost," clicked one of the foreign representatives. "Breeding grounds compromised." "They have never attacked in such numbers," added another. Riker studied the crude map they'd created on the chamber floor, a topographical representation of territories and hive locations. The pattern was clear. The Void Walkers were executing a coordinated assault, something beyond mindless predation. "They're being driven," Riker said, pointing to a region on the map where no attacks had occurred. "Something is pushing them from their traditional hunting grounds." The Luminar representatives clicked rapidly among themselves. Empress approached Riker, her enormous compound eyes reflecting his image. "Lightbringer sees patterns we cannot," she communicated. "Will you lead our scouts to the empty territory?" The request startled him. After just 2 weeks, he was being asked to command Luminar forces on a reconnaissance mission. The irony wasn't lost on Riker, exiled by his own kind, yet offered authority by aliens who should, by all logic, have killed him on sight. But survival on Mors 9 meant seizing every advantage. And understanding why the Void Walkers were on the move could mean the difference between life and death for both him and his unlikely allies. "I'll lead your scouts," Riker agreed, thumping his spear against the ground in what had become a gesture of commitment among the Luminar. Empress's mandibles clicked in approval. "The light guide your path." As Riker departed the chamber with Tracker, he noticed the other representatives watching him, not with suspicion, but with something that felt remarkably like hope. The human exile was becoming something more on Mors 9, a commander. The reconnaissance team moved silently through Mors 9's western territories. 8 elite Luminar scouts, led by Riker, traversed terrain so hostile it defied description. The ground beneath them shifted periodically, as if the planet itself were breathing. Magnetic anomalies disrupted Riker's remaining tech, forcing him to rely on the Luminar's natural navigation abilities. "Void Walker signs ahead," clicked Sentinel, the team's point scout. Her antenna quivered as she analyzed microscopic traces invisible to human eyes. Riker had come to appreciate the Luminar's specialized adaptations. What they lacked in technology, they compensated for with evolutionary advantages. Each scout possessed unique talents. Sentinel could detect chemical traces left by other species. Chasm could perceive minute vibrations through the crystalline soil. Flux could sense electromagnetic fluctuations. "How fresh?" Riker asked, his vocal apparatus now augmented with a biomechanical translator that approximated luminar speech patterns. "Less than one rotation," Sentinel replied. "Large grouping. Moving with purpose." They crested a ridge of obsidian shards, and Riker's enhanced vision captured what lay beyond. A massive depression in the landscape, a perfect circle nearly 5 kilometers in diameter. At its center stood a structure so alien it momentarily defied comprehension. A towering monolith of material that seemed to bend light around it. "That's not natural," Riker muttered. Tracker, who had insisted on joining the mission despite his youth, clicked nervously. "No Hive records speak of this place." The team descended cautiously toward the anomaly, maintaining communication through subtle antenna movements that wouldn't alert potential predators. As they approached the depression's edge, Riker noticed the complete absence of Mors 9's typical background radiation. This area was shielded somehow. "Full defensive formation," Riker ordered as they entered the depression. The change was immediate and disorienting. Gravity lightened subtly. The air, normally laden with metallic particulates, cleared. Most notably, the constant pain that had become Riker's companion since landing diminished. "This place is engineered," he realized aloud. "Someone altered this environment." They were halfway to the central monolith when the attack came, not from void walkers, but from beneath. The ground erupted as massive serpentine creatures burst upward, their segmented bodies glistening with oily secretions. Unlike the void walkers, these predators hunted in coordinated patterns that spoke of higher intelligence. "Guardians!" shrieked Chasm, narrowly avoiding snapping jaws. "Ancient protectors!" The team scattered in practiced defensive patterns. Riker activated his lightstaff, a weapon he'd engineered by combining his multi-tool with bioluminescent compounds harvested from deep-dwelling luminar larvae. The intense beam caused the nearest Guardian to recoil momentarily. Fighting alongside the luminar scouts had taught Riker to move differently, utilizing all 3 dimensions, thinking in complex spatial patterns rather than linear human combat strategies. He vaulted over a Guardian strike, landed on its segmented back, and drove his crystalline blade deep into a nerve cluster. The battle was brutal but brief. 2 scouts perished before the remaining Guardians retreated beneath the surface. Riker organized a quick mourning ritual for the fallen, a luminar tradition he'd come to respect. Then they pressed on toward the monolith, now more determined than ever to uncover answers. The structure defied conventional analysis. It appeared to be constructed of a single material with no visible seams or joins. Its surface rippled occasionally, like liquid suspended in zero gravity. "This is technology far beyond the Federation," Riker concluded as he cautiously approached. "Possibly beyond any known species." When his gloved hand touched the monolith's surface, information flooded his neural interface. Data so complex and voluminous that his augmented brain could barely process it. Images of stars, planets, evolutionary matrices, and mathematical equations cascaded through his consciousness. When the information flood subsided, Riker stood motionless, his mind reeling from revelation. "Lightbringer." Tracker approached cautiously. "What have you discovered?" Riker turned to his alien companions, his expression grim beneath his modified helmet. "This planet isn't natural," he stated. "Mors 9 is a construct, a testing ground created by beings who were ancient when our species were still primordial soup. And something at its core is waking up." The luminar scouts clicked in alarm, their antennae vibrating with agitation. "We need to return to the hives," Riker decided. "What's happening here affects every living thing on this planet. The Void Walkers aren't enemies, they're refugees, fleeing from whatever's stirring beneath us." As they began their retreat from the monolith, the ground trembled more violently than before. This was no ordinary seismic event. It was something massive shifting far below the surface. Mors 9's test was entering its final phase. And Riker, the exiled human commander, now understood that survival would require more than strength and cunning. It would require uniting every species on this lethal world. 3 lunar cycles had transformed Riker beyond recognition. His body, enhanced with luminar biotechnology and hardened by Mors 9's extreme conditions, was a hybrid of human resilience and alien adaptation. More significantly, his position had evolved, no longer merely tolerated, but elevated to Grand Strategist of an unprecedented alliance. The Grand Chamber of the Central Hive, once exclusively Luminar territory, now hosted representatives from 6 distinct species native to Mors 9. The Luminar occupied the upper tiers with their crystalline structures. Below them, the massive, oozing forms of the Gravidonts anchored themselves to specialized platforms. Orbiting the chamber's middle sections, the gaseous, sentient collectives called Whisper Minds pulsed with communication frequencies. Even several pods of Void Walkers, former enemies, had sent emissaries who lingered in shadowed recesses. The disturbances increase in frequency and intensity, Riker addressed the assembly, his voice amplified and translated through a network of organic transmitters. According to our combined observations, we have perhaps 20 rotations before catastrophic planetary reconfiguration begins. The revelation from the monolith had proven accurate. Mors 9 was entering its endgame, a deliberate destabilization programmed by its ancient creators. The planet wasn't merely hostile. It was designed to become progressively more lethal, forcing its inhabitants to adapt or perish. What purpose serves this testing? Vibrated the Gravidont representative, its massive form rippling with emotion. Evolution acceleration, Riker replied. The builders wanted to create species that could survive anything, perfect biological machines. The Whispermind collectives pulsed with agitation, sending thought patterns that translated roughly to skepticism. The human suggests we are laboratory specimens? We all are, Riker confirmed. Including me. The builders seeded thousands of worlds with basic life forms, then periodically introduced challenges to force adaptational jumps. The assembly absorbed this with various species-specific expressions of shock, denial, and anger. Riker let the reactions wash through the chamber before continuing. But the system has malfunctioned, he explained. The monolith data suggests the control mechanisms are destabilizing after millions of years without maintenance. Instead of controlled evolutionary pressure, we're facing complete planetary collapse. Empress, now Riker's most steadfast ally, clicked her mandibles for attention. The Lightbringer proposes a solution that requires all species. Riker activated the holographic display he'd engineered from salvaged pod components and Luminar bioluminescent technology. A three-dimensional map of Mors 9 appeared, highlighting a network of energy conduits converging at the planet's core. The builders created fail-safes, emergency shutdown mechanisms that could be activated if the experiment needed termination. But they required cooperation between different biological adaptations. He indicated specific points on the map. Gravity chambers that only Gravidonts can navigate. Light puzzles attuned to Luminar perception. Void gates that require Void Walker phase-shifting abilities. The list continues. No single species was meant to access the shutdown alone. The implications settled over the assembly. Mors 9's lethal design had forced species into isolated evolution, yet survival now demanded unprecedented cooperation. Why trust human leadership? Challenged a Void Walker emissary, its form shifting between solid and gaseous states. Your kind are newcomers to this world. Riker had anticipated this question. Because I'm the only one who can communicate with all of you. My neural interface, combined with your various biological technologies, bridges communication gaps that have separated your species for eons. He straightened to his full height, now impressive even among the larger Luminar. I was sent here to die. Instead, I learned to survive by understanding this planet and its inhabitants better than my own people ever could. I'm not asking you to trust me because I'm human. I'm asking you to trust me because I've proven I can adapt. The chamber fell silent as species that had evolved as predators and prey to one another contemplated alliance under a human commander. Finally, Empress stepped forward. The Luminar follow the Lightbringer. One by one, representatives from each species indicated their agreement, some reluctantly, others with enthusiastic displays of commitment. Riker looked across the assembly. This impossible coalition of evolutionary marvels, each species a testament to survival against astronomical odds. Under different circumstances, he might have been their prey. Now he was their commander. We begin immediately, he ordered. Teams will form according to the skill requirements for each fail-safe location. We have 20 rotations to save a world designed to kill us. As the assembly dispersed to prepare, Tracker approached Riker privately. The Federation abandoned you to the most lethal planet in charted space, the young Luminar observed. Now you command it. Is this what humans call irony? Riker's modified face, now bearing bioluminescent markings that signified his status among the Luminar, formed what might still be recognized as a smile. No, Tracker. Humans call this justice. The final approach to Mors 9's core facility pushed the Alliance to its breaking point. 16 days of perilous descent through increasingly impossible terrain had claimed lives from every species. The planet's defense systems, awakened fully now, targeted the expedition with precision that bordered on malice. Riker led from the front, his hybrid form moving with lethal efficiency through challenges that would have instantly killed the human who had first landed on this world. His exoskeleton, now more Luminar than Federation technology, gleamed with bioluminescent markings that signified his unprecedented rank, Nexus Commander of the combined species. Gravitational anomaly ahead, warned Drift, a gravidant scout whose massive form rippled with anticipation. Terminal density approaching. Before them yawned a chasm so deep that light disappeared into its depths. Sensors indicated crushing pressure gradients that would flatten most organisms. This was the final barrier, the last defense before the planetary control core. Proceed according to Formation Epsilon, Riker ordered through the telepathic network established by Whispermind allies. Void Walkers phase first to establish anchor points. The operation unfolded with precision that would have astonished Federation military strategists. Species that had evolved as mortal enemies now functioned as a unified force, their specialized adaptations combining to overcome obstacles that no single species could survive. Void Walkers shifted partially out of normal spacetime, securing dimensional tethers along the descent path. Gravidants manipulated local gravity fields, creating navigable corridors through crushing pressure zones. Luminar Lightweavers established illumination patterns that disrupted automated defense systems. Even the recently allied magma drifters, silicon-based entities that inhabited Mors 9's deeper volcanic regions, provided crucial heat shields. At the expedition's center moved Riker, coordinating it all. The neural interface that had once simply translated Federation communications now linked directly with multiple alien consciousness types simultaneously. His mind had expanded beyond human limitations, adapting just as his body had. Core facility breach in 3 segments, he announced as they approached the final barrier. A seamless wall of the same material as the monolith. Empress, who had refused to remain behind despite her vital leadership role, positioned herself beside Riker. The builders never anticipated their specimens would cooperate at this level. That was their fundamental error, Riker replied. They designed the perfect evolutionary pressure cooker but failed to account for shared intelligence. The wall before them began to pulse with energy as recognition protocols activated. Unlike previous defenses, this one seemed to assess them with something approaching consciousness. Life forms detected, echoed a voice that translated differently into each species' perception. Unauthorized genetic combinations identified. Termination protocols initiating. The facility had recognized their unprecedented alliance as a threat. Energy weapons emerged from recessed compartments. Atmospheric composition began shifting toward universal toxicity. Now! Riker commanded. Each species representative moved simultaneously, activating biological countermeasures developed during their preparation. Void Walkers phase-shifted the defensive weapons. Whisperminds broadcasted confusion patterns on the facility's communication frequencies. Luminar Lightweavers created false targeting images. Riker himself approached the central console, his hybrid physiology now containing genetic markers from every major species in the Alliance, a biological skeleton key that might fool the ancient system. Administrator access requested, he stated clearly, placing his transformed hand on the interface surface. The system hesitated, its sensors analyzing his impossible genetic makeup. Invalid genetic profile, it finally responded. However, adaptation parameters exceed design thresholds. Experiment success criteria potentially achieved. The defense systems paused their attack. Displays activated throughout the chamber, showing evolutionary matrices and adaptation curves. The Alliance members saw themselves as the system did, specimens that had exceeded their creators' expectations. The experiment was designed to produce species capable of surviving extreme conditions, Riker realized. We've demonstrated something beyond that, the ability to transcend evolutionary isolation and work together. Request clarification of current status, the system inquired, its tone shifting from hostile to analytical. Riker stood tall, his hybrid form embodying the alliance he commanded. We are no longer your specimens. We are the inheritors of Mors 9. We claim this world not as separate species, but as a unified civilization. The system processed this declaration, its ancient algorithms adjusting to an outcome its creators had never anticipated. Unprecedented evolutionary development accepted, it finally announced. Administrator privileges granted to representative genetic collective. Planetary systems transferring to indigenous control. Around them, the facility transformed. Weapons retracted. Environmental controls stabilized. Holographic interfaces appeared, displaying the planet's complex systems in forms each species could comprehend. "What now, Commander?" asked Tracker, who had survived every challenge to remain at Riker's side. Riker surveyed the assembled representatives, this impossible coalition he had forged from the lethal crucible of Mors 9. Each bore scars and adaptations from their shared struggle. Each had transcended the limitations of their evolutionary isolation. "Now," Riker replied, his voice resonating with authority earned through trials that would have broken any ordinary human, "we reshape this death world into our world." He approached the central control interface, his transformed hand hovering over commands that could reconfigure the entire planet. "The Federation exiled me to die on the most lethal planet in charted space," he said, addressing not just his allies but the memory of those who had betrayed him. "Instead, I found my true purpose. They gave me a death sentence. I turned it into a command." With decisive movement, Riker activated the planetary transformation sequence. Throughout Mors 9, ancient machinery rumbled to life, not to increase lethality, but to begin healing a world designed for death. "The Federation will return eventually," Empress noted. "They will find something far different from what they expect." Riker's expression, still recognizably human despite its alien modifications, formed into a smile that contained both warmth and warning. "Good," he said. "Let them come. They'll find that the human they abandoned now commands not just a lethal planet, but the most advanced multi-species civilization in the galaxy." As if responding to his words, the central chamber illuminated fully, revealing technology beyond anything known to the Federation. The builders had left behind not just a testing ground, but the tools to forge something new from those who survived their trials. Riker stood among his alien allies, no longer an exile, but a Nexus commander who had united the impossible. The most lethal planet in charted space was transforming under his command, and with it, the future of all species who called it home. The Federation had sent one human to die. Instead, they had created a legend,